isn't often I buy new games, let alone day one of release outside the yearly atelier, because that's basically a ritual for me. Fortunately, and unfortunately, this year's entry is a free-to-play game, so I can instead spend the money on something that kind of came out of nowhere for me. Last year, I really got into Granblue Fantasy Versus, and I liked it so much, I decided to take a look at the demo for Relink, an action RPG that's been in development for about 7 years. And you know what? That demo sold me. Granblue Fantasy Relink feels like a game I've been craving for a long time, but just haven't quite found until now. I've been having a lot of fun with it, and I'm glad I picked it up, even if at best it feels like an okay game with fantastic presentation. So hey, you're already here. Take a seat, grab a drink, and let's talk about it. Granblue Fantasy Relinquished is the epitome of anime junk food. Tasty, indulgent, plentiful, but not particularly complex. It's all about a long string of missions in closed-off areas, hacking and slashing and magicking your way through mobs of enemies before taking on a huge boss, then going back to a hub area and doing it all again. So think of something like Bayonetta, but not nearly as difficult. That might be the best way to summarize this game. If Grandy Boss Fortune Versus is to Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, Groove Bless Fanzine Relish is the same to Bayonetta. It's a lot flashier, it's more simplistic, and its target audience is broader and inviting to more casual players who are just looking for a good time while offering loads of extra minutia for those wanting to dedicate time to the system. I've heard this described as a spectacle fighter, and I think that's a fair description. You're playing as distinct characters with a solid range of moves, getting into constant group brawls punctuated with these massive boss fights, but the actual gameplay at its core is much easier to understand than, say, Devil May Cry. First off, you only have a handful of combos, but considering the smallish health pools of enemies, constantly smacking basic attacks before finishing with a heavy is totally fine. It makes the battles easier to understand and handle when you have so many combatants on the field at any given time. You have a party of up to 4 different characters during a mission, and the amount of members on offer is crazy. Right off the bat, you have access to Gran/Jita, Catalina, Io, Rackham, Yugen, whose name is not spelled like it sounds, and Rosetta, and each of them has a separate growth tree, rules in combat, and elemental affinities, and those are just your starting options. You can unlock even more party members using these special tickets, and the first one I got is Vasaraga, because he's voiced by Sung-Won Cho, and I just think that's neat. Plus, he's a super huge dude with a crazy dark power sight that hits like a dang cement truck being thrown by the Hulk, so yeah, he's just pretty cool. Super fun to have in the party. I also picked up Fairy because she's one of my mains in Versus, and I like the concept of having a battle ghost on my team. Reminds me of Pamela Ibis, and you can't get me to hate that. What makes it even better is how you can choose any of them to lead the party under your control, with each one having their own combos and unique abilities. I pretty much just played as Jita for my recording with some dabbling in Fairy and Lancelot, but this game feels like it wants to provide you with as much variety as possible, even if the things you do are kind of repetitive. Not to say what you do isn't fun, it's actually a pretty great time. Slashing through groups of enemies, dodging attacks, pulling off specials all feel solid, and there are so many characters on the roster, you're bound to find a combination that best suits your playstyle. It's like an insanely polished arcade beat-em-up, where the things you're doing can feel repetitive and maybe even a bit boring, but the actual feel of the game combined with the options and the sheer scale of some events makes it worthwhile. It's just fun charging into a group of monsters and cutting them to ribbons with a party of your favorite characters. As you play and gain levels, you also gain points that can be spent on anyone's skill tree, which ranges from simple stat increases to entire new skills to be mixed and matched however you'd like. I'll say this, if you're a fan of the anime Kimetsu no Yaiba, and I say the Japanese name because Blade of Demon Destruction is way cooler than Demon Slayer, and you want to play a game that feels like that show, you'll probably love this. It'll be your game of the year. Because just like that show, Granny Bear Fallacy Recidivism is a generally competent experience which would not be nearly as good without the presentation. I wonder how many angry Kimetsu fans will leave hate comments for that. I know that sounds like a backhanded insult, but believe me, it isn't. I'd be a big ol' liar if I said the visuals didn't tip my decision to buy the game. When I saw the character models have actual painted on hatching, yep, I was sold. I'm not kidding, I love it when developers give 3D models and environments distinct elements of traditional art. Valkyria Chronicles is the same way for me. I'm not a strategy fan by any means, but give your game some kind of painterly style and, yep, I'm on board. Granblue to me, as a property, always felt like basically competent story writers teaming up with the best fantasy artists Cygames could find, and I love how the aesthetic translates into 3D even more than in Versus. Characters and enemies are all vibrant and easy to make out no matter the environment. Nearly everyone has this immediate sense of life and personality from their designs and colors, and some of these areas are just plain gorgeous. I remember when I got in the tutorial battle and Bahamut was taking down the ship because Little Miss Moe MacGuffin thought summoning a dragon god was a reasonable response to a small flock of weak enemies, and I just looked out to see the setting sun peeking out between the high rock formations. It was actually kind of annoying when Bahamut popped up because it meant he was blocking the view. Get out of the way. This game's art team needs to take a bow because the world and everything in it looks so clean and high quality. Well, mostly the ice level's pretty bland, but then you get to see the giant ice castle and... Okay, I'm gonna say my main problem with this game and how it feels like the story lacks personality. And I know a castle made of ice isn't very original, but dang, it looks so neat on screen. And sometimes when I was on a mission, I would just stop and look off the edge of the island, taking in the sights of the Skydome with all its floating land masses, and it made the adventure feel like more than what I was doing at the moment. The world design gives this game a grand sense of scope that makes me want to keep pressing on, even when I largely don't care about what's happening. Yes, I want to battle these weird floating ice bomb things. I want to go to the castle. Yes, I want to board the enemy ship and break their engines? Cannons? Do you see all the airships fading in and out of the clouds? This is such a cool scene. Yes, I want to go into Goblin territory for whatever the reason I had to go into Goblin territory. Look at all these little goblins in the rafters of the ramshackle Coliseum. It's daunting. The presentation carries the experience so much for me, and I imagine it does for quite a lot of others who enjoy it. When you get right down to it, Gravel Barn Fumble Reloaded is a pretty baseline hack and slash with loads of options to keep itself fresh, made so much better because the audio and visuals reinforce the repetitive simplicity of its gameplay. To put it in a less pretentious way, it just feels good to hit things, and all you do in this game is hit things. I'm a big fan of Jet Set Radio. I've played it several times and it's always fun, but if you were to strip out the color, pop, and distinct style, it just wouldn't be as good. Presentation goes longer than I think most people give it credit, and it can make something great feel boring, or something just okay feel amazing. This game's combat mechanics are just alright. They're solid enough, but I don't think they could carry the experience on their own, even with the crazy amount of variety given all the characters. The chaotic and impactful feel from the presentation is what really sells it and makes it feel satisfying to keep playing. They even do this cool freeze frame thing when you beat a boss. That's just a cool punctuation to a long battle, and I like seeing it. It's neat. And the super moves, those are just... Man, the super moves are cool. They're called Skybound arts, and setting off a whole team's worth of them, which then triggers an even bigger final attack, that feels nice. It isn't complicated, it isn't hard, but dang, it is flashy and fun to watch. If you're looking for a good arcade-like action RPG with the depth for tinkering around, I'd seriously recommend giving some consideration to Green Bean Funnel Cake Rewire. However, if you're looking for a game with an original story and new ideas, maybe look elsewhere. The plot centers around a young boy or girl of your choosing and their crew of adventurers as they pursue a strange organization that kidnapped a girl named Lyria. Or as I like to call her, the most MacGuffin anime girl to ever girl anime MacGuffin. Okay, look, this game is fun, it has really enjoyable combat, the presentation is phenomenal, but man, does its story feel like the most milquetoast fantasy anime TM stuff possible. I will admit, I'm probably looking at this from a place of ignorance. I've been told this doesn't actually cover the story of the original gacha and instead takes place like 150 chapters later or something, so I'm probably missing most of the context that makes this world, the central plot, or the characters interesting. The more I look into Gravy Balloon Focaccia, the more it just feels like Cygames' goal was to make vanilla fantasy anime TM and hire a bunch of really talented artists to make the property interesting and hook fans of the gacha, then use that as a platform for these larger scale projects. Because nothing I've seen from its narrative has gotten a bigger reaction from me than, as neat, I guess. Who's the main character? An actual void named Gran, or Jita, depending on your choice, who possesses no personality in this, and from Versus they're just generic anime protag with sword. What's the inciting incident? A mysterious demure girl falls from the sky and needs everyone else to do everything for her, despite having the ability to summon and control giant monsters. And I'm sorry for those who like Lyria, but I absolutely hate her kind of character. The cutesy plot device mowing girl who's just there because she needs player Sun's strength to keep her from the bad guys. Maybe I just get that feeling because I know she's from a gacha game and her whole thing just feels like a subtle tugging plea from Cygames to say, "Thank you for saving me, player Sun, but there's going to be trouble ahead. Maybe you should spend money on random weapon gambling to be prepared and keep me safe." I don't know. That's probably just how I read it, but she's so bland otherwise, I kind of want that to be true. She's not the only one. I can point to pretty much every character in the plot and say, "You are X archetype made manifest." I get it, these characters are probably more fleshed out than I'm giving them credit for, but just going off what behavior of theirs I have seen, dude, they're so boring. Responsible and serious big sister figure, the excitable little sister figure, the slightly cocky pilot guy, the femme fatale whom I know nothing about, the old veteran warrior voiced by Keith Griff. Again, how many roles are you asked to do in a month, Mr. Epcar? They all feel so flat to me, and again, I do admit that's probably coming from a place of ignorance because my only exposure to them is playing the fighting game, and now this, and I'm not even finished with the main story yet, I'm almost there. They do provide you with special missions dedicated to giving characterization to party members you recruit, and that's nice, but I personally haven't found much for me to care about them as characters, you know? The cast just feels extremely basic and stock anime tropes given form, but really, that's only as much a problem as you make it. I do believe there's always something to be said for stories that just do the basics well, and I can't say I dislike the cast outside of Lyria and Vern. They're all perfectly functional for this kind of game, and even then, that's not really why I'd recommend this game, which is really my overall opinion of Grown Barbados Foliage Rudy Rough Knight. It's a very fun game, fit to burst with options and systems and little nuances that fit together nicely, but don't require a deep understanding to be decent at playing. Wrap all those systems up with some great presentation, the result is a solid action game pretty much anyone can play. The story's decent enough, and the cast isn't unlikable, so if you're interested in this game for the action, those shouldn't be much of an issue, and if you plan to play with others, I bet it'd be even better. Yeah, I should mention I didn't play any multiplayer for this video. I pretty much never play with other people, and I don't pay for PS Plus, so I have no reason nor means to play co-op in the first place, but I'd imagine it's a big draw for people who enjoy multiplayer. It is kind of a shame how you can only do that with the instant side missions. I bet a full-on co-op campaign would sell people on that alone. Still, speaking as someone who just went about this in single player, there's an impressive amount of content on offer, especially if you're one who enjoys tinkering with the systems. It's enjoyable enough for me to want to finish it, but once I do, I probably won't think of it in the same way I do stuff like Disco Elysium or 13 Sentinels or Like a Dragon. If I do think of it again, it'll be for the big, silly set piece moments, fighting one of the bosses on an airship just to have him chuck his spear and jump onto it to fly. This guy basically threw himself. That's amazing. Or going to the desert and battling this gigantic sentinel, lasers firing all over the place as you chip away at its health. This is what I meant when I said this game is anime junk food. Just ridiculous over-the-top moments and large-scale action from end to end, and it paces them out well enough where each one's exciting. I want to continue just to see what wacky fight I get into next, not because I'm super invested in the actual plot, but that's still enough to keep me going. I'm sure it sounded like I was really ragging on the story and characters earlier, but really, I mean, I spend a lot of my free time playing Atelier, and am fully prepared to admit they don't have top-tier writing either, so, you know, it's only as big a deal as you make it. I don't like giving out numerical review scores on this channel because an opinion can lose almost all nuance when you boil it down to some arbitrary number out of 10, but Granblue Relink feels like a game that wants a review score. Does that make sense? Probably not to anyone but me. In that sense, I'd say this is a game with the bones of a 7 out of 10, but the presentation of a 9 out of 10. The story, the gameplay, those are both decent enough to be passable, but not mind-blowing for me. Pair those with the presentation though, and suddenly it becomes so much better. So I guess that means I say this is an 8 out of 10? Congrats, Grass Beetle Funyun Reliquary. You're officially one better than Remember Me in my ever-growing catalog of games. Going back to the junk food analogy, it's the Whataburger of anime video games. If you don't have that where you live, then I don't know, Culver's, I guess. Take that as you will. I hope it helps your purchasing decision. Hey there, thanks for watching. This is something I'm gonna try out a little bit. I wanted to talk about this game, but it didn't really fit with the main review, so I'm gonna try making these smaller, less edit intensive videos in the middle of the month, see how that works out. If you liked it, you know, stick around for the big videos. Let me know what you think of this format. Did you like it? Did you think it's stupid? I don't know. Have a nice day.